All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Really excited for today's event. So we are teaming up with the women from Hearts in the Ice for a really exciting series of live events. They are coming to us live from Svalbard today. They are back at the cabin Bamsebu. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that we're going to get a really good satellite connection for today. And the theme for this month is weather. Extreme weather, weather changes, as well as technology. So a little background. In 2019, 2020, Sunniva Sorby and Hilda Strom made history when they became the first women to overwinter in Svalbard solo. They spent 12 months at the remote trapper's cabin called Bamsebu, located at 78 degrees north and 140 kilometers from the closest town of Longyearbyen in Svalbard. Climate change isn't taking a break, so neither are they. So from November through till May 2021, they are back at Bamsebu. So no running water, no electricity, relying on wind and solar power. Their closest neighbors are the polar bears. And together with a team of 10 global partners, Hearts in the Ice is acting as a bridge between science and global citizens to better understand climate change and why we all need to play a role. So they will continue to serve as citizen scientists to build on their second year of data collection. So before we go and bring them in live, they sent me a little video clip from the cabin today. So let's take a little look.
Hi everybody.
Hello.
We arrived Bamsebu 4 days ago. We're outside now to preparing for another storm coming in. It's -2 today. A year ago it was like -20, and we are expecting a lot of snow the coming 24 hours, and then it's going to rain like crazy. What's happening with the climate, Sunniva?
Totally different from last year. So we have a solar panel over here, courtesy of Power Controls. And we have back here that you can't see a windmill that's generating electricity for us, or power. And we have a Round Tails mission link, which is providing satellite data connectivity courtesy of Marlink. So we're able to call all of you in a couple of days. We're all set up.
See you.
All right, so very cool video from Bamsebu. Let's bring Hilda and Sunniva in live to the call now. There's a little bit of a delay. It's about 4 or 5 seconds, but let's keep our fingers crossed that we can make this connection. So Hilda and Sunniva, if you can hear me, how are we doing today? You're on mute right now too, Hilda and Sunniva.
No, we're on.
Hi, Joe. Can you hear us?
We got you. You're coming in loud and clear.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Hilda and I are here, and a different time than last year because our Ethita is not with us. She's resting up from surgery, but she hopefully will find some magic way to get here in December. Thank you so much, Joe, for hosting the call today, and for all of you that have joined us live, including George, and those of you joining via YouTube. Thank you so much for showing up. As Joe mentioned, every month from now until May, we're going to host 2 calls with different education themes. So make sure you check out, and I'm sure Joe will post this somewhere, exploringbytheseat.com/HITI, and you'll see the list of all the events. And a huge thanks of gratitude to Marlink for going literally above and beyond to get us all set up with communication equipment for our stay here, and for being our satellite data partner for the entire duration of our time at Bamsebu. As a matter of fact, we are so thankful we're going to have a Thanksgiving dinner a little bit early tonight. It's in the kitchen, sort of brewing. So what's it like to be back here after having spent a full year here last year, taking 2 months off to visit family and friends in Norway and Canada, and then coming back with close to 3 tons of supplies in what we felt was a kind of a rickety boat, although a sturdy one, 4 strong helpers from Longyearbyen, and a setup that took all day last Friday. It really does feel like home here. It's a simple life where there's no regular internet, as you can tell, because we we can't see you via video. There's no Netflix, no running water, no electricity, no traffic, except for fox and reindeer prints that we see outside, and no external noise except for the wind, the pound of the surf, and the quiet spaces in between. We have no radio or no news from the US and the election and all of that, and really no real distraction. The only distraction coming from our thoughts as we try.
Okay, I think our signal may have dropped on us.
Try to settle back into this place. We're
just wanted to mention that we the weather and the climate has changed so much in the Arctic the last 15 years, and this year is really mild compared to last year. It's worrying actually, and we have rain coming in and had rain also a week ago, and that makes ice on the tundra, and it prevents the reindeers to eat from the tundra as they are used to. And it's also no sea ice yet, and the polar bears are struggling hunting their main source of food, which is seals. So we're really seeing a change in the whole world, but up here in the Arctic it's twice as fast. So it affects us as humans, but mostly the animals around us. We will see that reindeers are going to die this winter due to the fact that they can't come down to their food, the food sources, which is underneath the ice on the tundra. And the polar bears are trying to adapt to try to hunt on land. Last year, we this time actually, the 10th of November, we came across a polar bear that just had killed the reindeer. It came down. It was actually hunting the reindeer. It came down from a steep slope and attacked the reindeer from behind. And we see that the animals are trying to adapt, but the changes are happening too fast. So it's kind of it's difficult for the animals to adapt. So we look forward to hear more from George regarding the weather and what's happening in the Arctic, but also in the rest of the world.
All right. Well, I'm going to take over for a little bit now to introduce George. Hilda and Sunniva, it's so great to hear your voices and to see that video. You know, I don't want to jinx it yet, but this is one of our strongest connections yet. So I think this is going to be a really great Q&A session that we have coming up. All right. So we're going to bring George Kourounis in with us now. George is a renowned global adventurer, storm chaser, explorer, and television presenter. His efforts to document nature's worst weather conditions have taken him all over the globe. And he usually is going into the kind of places where people are going the other direction, trying to get away from. So he hosted 3 seasons of the show Angry Planet. He traveled all over the world, documenting some of the most extreme weather and places on our planet that you can find. And you'll also see him popping up in places like the Weather Network and the Science Channel as an expert. Let's bring George in live with us. In fact, George, you popped up on my Facebook the other day out on, I think it was Lake Ontario, and some pretty extreme weather with some people trying to surf out on the lake.
Yeah, that was Lake Erie, actually. Yeah, so we had this crazy weather event here in Canada where we had these extreme winds and waves on Lake Erie. And of course, I was out there to document it. And as Joe mentioned, I travel all over the world, and I specialize in photographing and shooting video and doing scientific measurements of extreme forces of nature. So climbing inside erupting volcanoes, going inside the eye of hurricanes and chasing tornadoes and putting cameras in the paths of avalanches, things like that. And over the past 20 years, I've been fortunate enough to travel to every single continent, numerous times, dozens and dozens of countries. So I've been able to see firsthand the effects of our changing weather and these weather patterns that have been shifting, but they shift differently, different parts of the world, depending upon where you are. So there are spots on planet Earth that are getting drier and hotter, and there's places that are getting colder and wetter. because it's not just one particular thing that's changing as the atmosphere gets warmer, it's a shift in patterns. So even though the overall global temperature is increasing, you may actually live in a part of the world that is going to see something very different than your neighbor who may not be too far away. And so I've got some examples today of some of the weather that they get in Svalbard. So Hilda and Sanova are in a very difficult part of the world, to say the least, and I'm not sure if they're brave or crazy for wanting to return back there. I give you two ladies a lot of credit, because that's a long time in a very cold, dark environment surrounded by hungry polar bears that really want to get back out on the sea ice, but obviously they're having difficulties. So there are some serious challenges there. But what is the difference between weather and climate? So there's an old saying that weather is what you get versus climate is what you expect. If you live in Arizona, you expect to have really hot, dry conditions for most of the year, right? But on any given day, you could go outside and say, oh, it's chilly out today, or oh, it's warm out today. It's a beautiful, really nice day. So the average temperature for any given day, we rarely ever hit that exact average temperature. We're usually a degree above or below, or 2 or 3 or 5 degrees above or below. Right? There's always going to be a variation. But what we're seeing now is those variations getting warmer and warmer and warmer on a global scale. And there's no place in the world that's seeing these variations more dramatically than the Arctic. So let me just share my screen here. And so for those of you who don't know where Bamsebu is, it's in the archipelago. It's a Norwegian archipelago of islands up there at the very top of the screen. This is extremely far north. The entire archipelago is well north of the Arctic Circle. And little trivia question or nugget of information, I guess. What is the Arctic Circle? Well, the Arctic Circle is everything that is north of 66 degrees, 33 minutes north. And what that means is that's the most southern point that you can go to where you still get 1 full day of daylight and 1 full day of nighttime per year. And the further north you go, the longer it gets until you get to the North Pole, where you got 6 months of daylight and 6 months of darkness. So specifically, there is Bamsebu down in the southeastern portion of Spitsbergen, the largest island of the Svalbard archipelago there. So they're actually in a pretty good spot. There's a bay there that is sheltered from the prevailing winds. So most of the winds that come down from the north are sheltered a bit. The winds that come from the south are sheltered by the mountains to a certain degree. The worst winds would be the ones that come from the northwest, because you've got that clear stretch of water that leads right to where they're situated. So I'll bet you their worst days are the days where they've got a northwest wind. And in terms of temperatures, these are sort of the average temperatures. So in the summer, 3 to 7 degrees, we're talking 37 Fahrenheit to 44 Fahrenheit, with the peak being in July. The record high temperature, 21 degrees Celsius, which is where I live here in Toronto. That's a nice spring day, but that's their record high temperature. But cold here, this is where it gets really interesting. In the winter, they averaging 13 to 20 degrees below freezing, so 8 to -4 Fahrenheit in January, with the record low being a whopping -46 or -51. That does not include the wind chill value. That's just raw temperature. If you're outside on a windy day, the wind blows that warm layer of air that your skin warms up. So your body actually warms up a tiny microscopic layer of air around your skin. And when the wind blows that away, you feel cold. And that's exactly how wind chill works. So the main driver of weather for Svalbard and anywhere really in the North Atlantic is the Gulf Stream. And that is a warm water current in the Atlantic. It comes up from the equator, where you've got all that warm, bright tropical sun hitting the ocean, warms up the ocean, and the current carries that warm water north. And then it hits things like the Labrador Current, which is a cold current coming down from Greenland. And whenever you have these conflicting water sources or conflicting air sources coming together, that's where we get the most extreme storms. It's always about these contrasts of warm and hot, or high pressure and low pressure. And you can see that that North Atlantic current there, the Gulf Stream, is heading straight towards that arrow. If you were to continue that arrow straight up, well, that's Svalbard right there. So they're basically, once this current gets past Iceland, there's nothing stopping it before it hits Svalbard. And here's an example of a storm that hit last year. I don't remember which day exactly it was, but it was in January. So the ladies were up there. And this looks, I mean, to me, it looks very much like a hurricane. You can see this eye shape, the rotation of this gigantic storm. It stretches from northern Europe all the way north to the northern tip of Greenland. So it's these massive polar vortex storms. And I'm sure many of you have heard the term polar vortex before. And it's these areas of low pressure that are these massive storms. They're fed by that warm Gulf Stream water. And this particular one was so strong, it was the equivalent of a Category 1 hurricane. Although technically it wasn't a hurricane, you wouldn't want to be outside in this for very long. The blowing snow and ice would make every little drop feel like a needle hitting you in the face, especially when it's traveling at 77 miles an hour, probably with higher gusts. So this storm was definitely a big weather maker up there. And this is the kind of weather that they can expect to have moving forward through this winter. And in the years to come, we're expecting more and more of these big, we call them bomb cyclones sometimes because they intensify so much. It's almost like a weather bomb going off. One of the other big weather makers in places like Svalbard and Greenland and Antarctica are the glaciers. You get these winds that come streaming down off the glacier, this denser, colder air. And these winds are called katabatic winds. I've experienced these in places like Greenland, where if you're at the foot of the glacier, these winds come roaring downhill and just blast you with this unbelievable intensity. This air is chilled by the glacier. It wants to fall and drop. So it's basically gravity taking this colder air downhill. And you don't have to get too far away from the glacier and it just basically goes away. But if you're close to these, it can be just tremendous. And Svalbard is about 60% glaciated and has some of the fastest moving glaciers on Earth. And that's not good. We don't want the glaciers to be moving too fast because they'll disappear and that can cause lots of problems. So we've seen about a 10 degree Fahrenheit or 6 degrees Celsius increase in global temperature in the past 100 years. And a lot of that has happened within the past 3 decades. And so this is for the Arctic. And it's warming at about double the global rate as we've already mentioned. So yeah, so the Arctic and the Antarctic are really the sort of the two places we need to monitor very closely because that's where we're getting the most change from carbon dioxide emissions and other greenhouse gases that are warming the land, warming the sea in particular. What happens is because the ocean is dark, we know that dark colors absorb sunlight better. If you get into a black car in the middle of the summer, it's going to be hotter than getting into a white car in the summer, right? So the ocean is absorbing a lot of this energy. It's heating up and it's melting a lot of these glaciers from underneath. Many of these glaciers extend out into the sea. And if the sea gets warmer, which it is, then you can have a lot of problems of the glaciers melting from underneath. I've got a really dramatic example of that. So here's a satellite image of some of the glaciers in Svalbard. This image is from 1990, and I'm going to fast forward here and show us what it looks like in 2017. So I'm going to bounce back and forth between these two images. There's 1990, and there's 2017. We can see there are several of these really big glaciers, Stornbreen and Hornbreen, that have lost a lot of their ice mass. And especially those two big glaciers, you can see that it's water they were out on the water, and the water has melted them from underneath, and they continue to recede. So that's only been a few decades. And so we're in a position now where we're getting to the point where reducing greenhouse gas emissions is one thing, but we need to actually also start working on ways to sequester or stow away some of that carbon that's already in the atmosphere. And the only way that we know how bad things are is by taking measurements. And luckily, we've got some people up in Svalbard who are spending their entire winter up there taking measurements and doing a lot of citizen science to help us understand more about what's going on in the Arctic, because it is such a critical spot for the future moving forward. So I'll leave you with that. Let's pass off to the ladies, because I want to make sure that they get plenty of time to tell you what's going on with their setup and getting ready to overwinter in this most harsh, one of the harshest places on Earth.
All right, so I'm going to bring everybody back into the call here. Thank you, George, for that great presentation. That was awesome. I'm going to open things up now to a little Q&A action. So we have classrooms joining us from across North America, which is awesome. So it's fair game now. Questions for George or questions for Hilda and Sunniva about, you know, life up at Bamsebu and what they have experienced and will be experiencing. So both types of questions are fair game. Let's start with one of our live camera classrooms and bring them into the mix. So let's go to, let's go to Mr. Mark's group. Mr. Mark's group is hanging out with us in Kingston, Ontario. Looks like a grade 6-7 class. Let's bring them in. How are we doing, Kingston?
Yeah.
Hello. Right. See ya.
I'm drunk. So I have a question for you, George, and it's, what's your favorite travel you've ever done?
Oh, my favorite travel I've ever done. Wow, that's a great question. I've been to giant crystal caves in Mexico. That was pretty amazing. Going to the volcanoes in the South Pacific, pretty amazing. One spot that really has a warm place in my heart, ironically, is Antarctica. I've been there numerous times and I love it so much. It's so beautiful. The wildlife, the seals, the penguins, the whales, the icebergs, the glaciers. It is absolutely beautiful. Real pristine wilderness down there.
All right, good question to get us started. Let's see here. Okay, here's a good question. So I'm going to grab this one off YouTube. Mr. Parker's class is tuning in. So Hilda and Sunniva, this will be a great one for the two of you. They're wondering about the strongest winds you've ever experienced up at Bamsebu.
The strongest wind that we experienced was the one that George just talked about. It was early January last year, and it was scary. We were afraid of that the roof were going to take off, and we had a rescue bag inside, and we were ready to go in case the roof went. But I think the strongest wind was 34 meters per second, which is hurricane. And then we had, and if you add then 18 minus degrees, it was like dangerous to be outside. So we kept ourselves inside for almost 3 days.
I just looked at my diary and it was actually January 7th, and I wrote hurricane in big letters and lots of exclamation marks.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
122 kilometers an hour, just for reference there.
All right, well, let's bring in another classroom live with us and steal a question. So I'm going to go now to Madame Boland's group. They're in Courtenay, British Columbia, some 5th graders. Let's bring them in live with us. There they are. ABC, how are you?
We're good. Sorry, we just had my computer just shut down unexpectedly.
That's okay. We got you. Were you able to catch some of the presentation?
Oh, totally. We caught it. We just, it's been 1 minute.
Okay, perfect. So a quick one. That's good.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh.
Okay. Julian. So Riley here has a question for you. Riley, go in front of the camera.
Hi. My question is for George. And
Nice to
my question is for George, and my question is, how did your family react when you said you were going to get married on volcano?
Okay, so someone has done their research. The question was, how did my family react when I told them I was getting married on a volcano? So yeah, 14 years ago, my wife Michelle and I, we got married in Vanuatu in the South Pacific on an exploding volcano. And they thought it was odd for sure. They couldn't attend the wedding because I wasn't going to get my family to come and climb a volcano. But we had a big party for them afterwards here in Canada, so it all ended up just fine. Thank you for doing your research.
Very cool. I'm going to turn that question to Hilda and Sunniva because I think this is a great question. How do your family and friends feel about the two of you, spending time so far away from everybody else?
Can you type the question to us?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Did I hear you right? The question is, what do our family and friends think of us being up here?
Yep, you got it.
Is that? Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, mixed emotions. Certain. I think that they, at least in my family and with my friends, they were not surprised that I would be coming up to the Arctic and spending 3 months in the polar night. And especially with Hilda, since when I met her, we found out we were kindred spirits and had a lot in common. So I think they were both surprised, worried. They were absolutely worried because of the number of polar bears that tend to hang out in the area that we're in. We had 53 polar bear encounters last year. So every time I shared that with close family and friends, they were like, they were a little bit nervous. But I think all in all, especially after having been here for a year and coming back, they're just amazed at how much we've accomplished and been able to sort through. We've had a lot of things go wrong, and there's not one thing we haven't fixed. And I'll let Hilda answer that.
Yeah, no, I think it's the same with my family, but I've been living up in the Arctic here at Svalbard for 25 years. So they are kind of familiar with me staying up here, but being on this extremely remote in this extreme environment for such a long time, just Sunniva and me, I think they also have been quite worried about me, and but also proud for what we are doing and our goals to reach as many as possible with the positive energy around trying to do something with the climate.
All right, very cool. So I'm going to bring in Mrs. Gertson's group. They're hanging out with us in Wheeler, Kansas. How are we doing today, Kansas?
Pretty good. So my question is for George. So we live in Tornado Valley. Is there any advice you'd give to anybody who would want to be a storm chaser?
Yeah. Sorry, what town are you in?
We live in near Hutchinson, Kansas. Not too far from Wichita.
I've been to Hutchinson. I've been to every little town in Kansas. I've been to Hutchinson more times than I can count. So yeah, my best advice for anyone, specifically for people who live in places like you, who live in Kansas, where they get a lot of tornadoes, if you're interested in chasing storms, learn as much as you can. Study, study, study. Learn how to forecast the weather. Learn, there's all kinds of educational information on the National Weather Service site and the National Severe Storms Lab. They have a great website with all kinds of educational resources. Learn how to read the sky and learn mostly about safety. That I can't stress that enough. Weather can be extremely dangerous. And if you don't know what you're doing, your curiosity can get you into trouble. Now, I want you to be curious. That's really important. But you have to balance curiosity with safety. So the more you learn and the more you understand, the more you read, the more you study, the more programs you watch, the more information you have, the safer you will be no matter what you do.
All right, very cool. Great question. I'm going to pop another question in here from YouTube. This one is for Hilda and Sunniva. They are wondering, this is Mrs. Sulduk's class. They're wondering about how you're going to keep warm over the winter and what the current temperature is right now.
Well, just now it's not cold at all. It's just -2, and last year it was around -20. This hut is not winter insulated, so it is hard work. We chop wood, and we keep the fire burning in our wood stove when it's really cold. And beside that, we have good clothes that we can put on even when we are inside.
And I have to share that this hut was built in 1930. It's an old trapper's cabin. And when Hilda says it's not insulated, she means it. With the winds in the right direction coming from the east, they kind of go through some of the panels in here. So we're really grateful for dry wood and a good wood burning stove.
All right. On some of our past events, we have heard the wind whistling through the cabin. So we can definitely hear when you're getting some of those big winds and those big storms. Okay, let's go to Calgary. We've got some 5th graders hanging out with Mrs. Katsko. Let's bring them into the call. There they are. How are we doing, Calgary?
Great. Yeah. Okay, you can take your mask off so you can hear you. So we're in Canada and we're learning about Canadian weather, which is where this question came from. In your opinion, what is the worst weather that has happened ever in Canada?
Wow, that's a great question. The worst weather to ever happen in Canada. Well, that sort of depends on what you consider to be the worst. The strongest tornado in Canada was in Ely, Manitoba. It was an F5 tornado, the strongest category. We've only had one in Canada's history that we know for sure was an EF5. Hurricane Hazel back in 1954 or 56, whenever it was. Devastating hurricane that hit Canada. The ice storm of 1998 was probably the costliest natural disaster in Canadian history, if I'm not mistaken. So it really sort of does depend on what you consider to be worst in terms of damaging, costly, fatalities, things like that. But those are the 3 big ones that really pop into my mind: the ice storm, Hurricane Hazel, and the Ely, Manitoba tornado. The Edmonton tornado of 1987 was really bad as well.
All right, George, I think what impressed me the most is you were just ready. You could just kind of pop those things off. Pretty darn impressive. And that's why we come to you. You are on top of weather, and that's awesome, George. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see here. We've got a few questions coming in via YouTube here. Miss Roberts' class is joining us in Milton, Ontario. And they'd like to know, I'm going to pose this to both groups. We'll get you to start, George, and then I'll go to Hilda and Sineva. What is the best part of your job doing what you do? So we'll start with you, George, and then I'll bring in Hilda and Sineva.
The best part of my job, well, traveling and seeing parts of the world that most people never get the opportunity to see, that's really my favorite part. Climbing mountains in North Korea, or going to the Turkmenistan desert, or just all these crazy things that I've had just thankful opportunities to have been able to do. But also sharing. I love sharing these experiences as well. So those are I'm going to say they're tied for first: experiencing and sharing.
All right, and let's bring in Hilda and Sineva. Same question. What is it that you love the most about what you do?
Oh, I love that question. What I love the most about what I get to do is that I have had the great fortune to travel around so much and have so many awesome adventures and meet so many interesting people, including George in the Arctic years ago. And I get to learn so much from these people who are much smarter than I am. I get to really understand what's happening in the big picture in the world. And it's turned me into someone, despite my age, that stays, passionately curious about everything. And I love the fact that I get to be doing what I'm doing and stay in this place of forever learning. And now with the project, find some way to shine a light out there on young and old to encourage everybody to stay curious as well. So pretty fortunate.
Yeah, and to me, it's all that. It's also about, which I also know that Sunniva loves, the part of this job is to be immersed in the nature, to be part of something that's so much bigger than us, and being so remote, being so quiet, being so close to the wildlife that we are, and also being part of, as Sunniva said, the Hearts in the Eyes community that really drives this dialogue towards something that we could never dreamt of when we started 2-3 years ago.
All right. Awesome. Very cool. Burlington, Ontario, Mrs. McKay's class. Give me a big wave if you can hear me. There they are. All right. If you go ahead and unmute, we'd love to grab a question. Should be it. It didn't work. Should be in the bottom corner. Kind of looks like a microphone. And it's probably red right now, and it should switch to kind of white after you click on it. All right. Well, for some reason, the mic doesn't cooperate. You can type that question into the chat for me, and we'll get that question to our speakers. But yeah, it looks like your microphone might not be cooperating right now. So I'll keep an eye out on the chat for that question. And while we wait for that, I'm going to go to a group in Michigan we have tuning in with us, Miss Maxwell's group. And I think this is a great question to pose to both groups as well. So George, Hilda, Sunniva. So George, the time you were in the field when you thought, uh-oh, maybe I've kind of bit off a little more than I was expecting here. And we'll pose that same thing to Hilda and Sunniva. I know you talked about the hurricane force winds, but was there another time up at Bamsebu that you were kind of like, oh, we might be in a little over our heads here? So we'll start with George.
During Hurricane Katrina, I was in Gulfport, Mississippi when Hurricane Katrina came ashore, and the entire city around me was being ripped to shreds. And it was like being in a blender for 8 hours. And my team and I, we were hunkered down in a steel reinforced concrete parking garage because it was the only building that we thought was going to survive. It was intense.
All right. And let's pose that same question to Hilda and Sunniva. A time where you were really nervous or afraid up in Bamsebu, or if there's another polar expedition, because, you know, between the two of you, you've both been, you know, over 25 years each exploring the North and the South. So.
Oh boy, I probably have more, what am I doing here thoughts than I do otherwise, but especially in the Antarctic when I got so sick, but I'm here, so I made it through that trip. But I think that one really scary moment for me here was in November last year when I know we keep telling people that the polar bears are our neighbors, and it's a true thing. It's very real, but I was really surprised to open the front door and see one sort of coming from just around the corner and right in front of me, 2 meters in front of me. That was a moment that took my breath away and a little bit too close for comfort.
Yeah, I think we had several of those during the last winter, and I'm sure it's more to come. But we have a lot of experience. But I think that the biggest challenge is to be so remote. And even though we have communication and we can talk to you guys and we can call by a satellite phone for help, we are so remote that we are absolutely in charge of our own security. And any problems that shows up is something we need to handle ourselves. So we are alert every single minute when we're outside, and just now it's a polar night, which means it's completely dark during the day and night. So we have to watch out for bad weather, as George has been talking about, but also polar bears sneaking around our hut, looking for food, because they're in the period of the year now that they are really hungry.
All right. And I thought it was bad here with the squirrels trying to get into our bird feeders right now. Polar bears are definitely a lot more to think about and worry about with your food supply. Okay, so Mrs. McKay's class, they're saying that the mouse was stuck, but they sent me in a question here. So I'm going to bring them back in so they can wave like crazy again. There they are. And they're wondering, Hilda and Sunniva, the weather, how do you keep track of what's coming? What the weather is going to be like up at Bamsebu? How do you stay connected?
That is a great question, and there's two things really. Inside here we have a little weather station. It's a little digital console. It shows us the humidity, it shows us the temperature, wind speed, sunrise, sunset, which there is none right now because we're in polar night, and we have a device outside that measures all of this, that's on top of the roof. And we also, courtesy of Marlink, our sponsor for this month, we have outside this big round white dish, and it's a Tails mission link, and that's enabling us to connect with all of you on Wi-Fi. So if need be, we could also call with our satellite phone to get weather updates, and check that from time to time if there's a big system moving in like last January's hurricane.
All right. And while we still have you nice and connected with us, Miss Blair's class is curious about Longyearbyen. How big is that city? How big is the population?
Can you repeat that question, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know your closest neighbor is over 140 kilometers away. That's in Longyearbyen. How big is that community? How big is Longyearbyen?
Yes, that is 2,300 people is living in Longyearbyen, and yeah, it's a little community with everything you need. It's a school, it's a theater, it's shops, it's a few hotels, and I live there. I've been living there since 1995, 25 years now. So it's a very community with a lot of international people, 52 nationalities, and it's a great place to live. We are dependent on each other because it's far away to the mainland of Norway, so it's kind of a very nice and cozy community.
I just want to share that when I met Hilde, she told me about this avalanche that happened in the town of Longyearbyen. Never before had they experienced that, and the slide came down almost directly behind their house, took away 10 neighbor homes, and sadly 2 people died. So when we left Longyearbyen just last week, they're still constructing this. I don't know how high it is, but this amazingly high barricade that will prevent a future avalanche from affecting any of the homes down below. So the community there is super, super tight. Everybody stays very close knit because of the conditions and the small community.
All right. So I want to share this banner here. Hilda and Sunniva mentioned it already, where you can find the events that we do have coming up and some of the curriculum materials that classrooms can use, because we're going to be doing a lot of these events between now and May 2021. So we're really looking forward to more of those live events. The classrooms who have tuned in with us today, I'm going to give you a second to do a quick shout out. But before we do, I want to check in kind of with George and Hilda and Sunniva one more time, just to kind of get a final thought. So George, I'll let you get started.
I want to put things in perspective as to how remote this place is. To get from Svalbard to the capital city of Oslo in Norway, it's about 2,000 kilometers over the Arctic Ocean. The International Space Station only is 400 kilometers above the Earth's surface. That fact just blows my mind.
All right, that's a good one. Hilda and Sinova, we've got a captive audience of students here. Hopefully they'll follow along with our monthly events and the website. But what is a message you'd like them to take away from the work you're doing and what you're seeing in the Arctic?
Well, be an active participant. We're all living in some form of isolation right now more than ever. And I think it's so important for all of us to open up the front door and get outside and do, as George mentioned many times, be really curious and educate yourselves. Hilda and I are trying to do that with our project, and we're going to continue to build stories to keep all of you engaged. We're citizen scientists, and that's something that every single one of you on the phone call can be. So check out that link, and there's lots of cool apps that you can look at to be a curious explorer in your own backyard.
Yes, and for you students out there, you are our future. So remember, power of one. We can all make a contribution.
All right, very cool. Well, I'm going to try something we've never been able to do before with the signal. I'm going to ask Hilda and Sinova, can you turn your camera on? I'm going to bring all the classrooms in and we'll do a big goodbye and thank you. The call's ending anyway, so there they are. Let's give it a go. Let me bring the classrooms in. Boys and girls, big goodbye and thank you from your classroom. Today, thank you so much. A huge shout out to George. Thank you for being an incredible expert today.
Woo!
Thank you everybody on YouTube. And Hilda and Sinova, thank you so much for doing what you do and letting us be a part of it. We love our monthly events, and we can't wait till next month when we tackle polar bears with Polar Bears International and Canada Goose. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Joe and George. We really, really appreciate it.
So cool. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right, everyone. We're going to sign off for today.